A very good morning to all. So, welcome to my anatomy and physiology class. Today I'm going to teach the endocrine system. So, let's start with an endocrine system. Here I have my notes. As we can say now, what is endocrine system? So, we will be discussing about endocrine system. It is basically a system that involves the collection of glands and the glands which produces the hormone. In this endocrine system, we basically study about the glands and the hormones and the function of hormone, how the hormones are released from the gland, and that hormone are released basically into the bloodstream, and then from the bloodstream, as we know that blood is a circulatory system, and from the bloodstream it is carried on to their target tissue where they will show their particular action. Okay, so first of all we should be clear about one thing, that is that our brain, see, our brain is like this, and there is a master gland which is known as the pituitary gland, which basically this where does the pituitary gland lies? It lies at the base of our brain. If we look at the skull, it lies at the base of our brain and it is below the hypothalamus. So hypothalamus releases some kind of a regulatory hormone. Those regulatory hormone will carry further the signal to the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland has two lobes. One is anterior and the other one is the posterior lobe. So from the posterior and anterior lobe, different hormones are being released. So what hypothalamus will do, it will release some kind of a regulatory hormone, and then they will carry the signal towards the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland will further releases the particularly hormones. Okay, and then those hormones will be released and they will further stimulate the particular, we can say, gland to release the hormone from the gland, and they will show their action. So endocrine system is the collection of, okay, I just turn my camera like this. So endocrine system is basically the collection of glands. As I told you that we will be studying that from different glands from where the hormone is released. So these glands has the cells where these hormones are being produced, and as we know that if we talk about the general function of the hormones, they regulate the metabolism, growth and development. Okay, so tissue function, sexual function, reproductive, sleep and mood. So one more thing I would like to clear, that endocrine glands are ductless. They don't have a duct. Okay, so these glands are ductless, so they release the hormone directly into the bloodstream. So from the bloodstream, these hormones are then they reaches towards the target tissue or organ. Okay, this point is clear to all. Now, as I have told that the gland has the cells, okay? So endocrine gland, they have a group of secretory cells that will secrete the hormones into the bloodstream, and from the bloodstream that those hormones will be carried towards a target tissue, and there they will have their particular receptor and they will bind to the target cell, and then it will show its effect. So we should be knowing about, in this chapter we should be clear about we have to learn that like which hormone is released from which gland and what is its function. So we need to remember this thing. Now as we are studying about the endocrine system, now so there should be a normal secretion of the hormone. There should not be a hypersecretion or hypersecretion. If there will be a hypersecretion, that means that level of hormone is raised in the bloodstream. That means there are chances of some kind of a disease, or that means may be depicted like that. The gland is secreting the hormone in a very 2 level, isn't it? So that means that gland is having some kind of a disease, or it may be a tumor of the gland. Okay, any disease state can occur. And if there is an hypersecretion, that means that your levels of hormone are low in the bloodstream, so their level has to be maintained. Okay, so in this way we can say that endocrine system maintains homeostasis environment through the use of the particular hormones. So their level has to be maintained. They don't have to be hyper, they don't have to be hypo, so it has to be maintained. If they are hyper secreted, that means that there is some kind of a disease in our pathological condition. There is an hyper secretion of a particular hormone, and in some kind of a disease there is an hypersecretion. So this point should be clear. So in this way we can say that endocrine system also maintains the homeostasis. There are 2 mechanisms in our body, that is positive feedback mechanism and negative feedback mechanism. This secretion is controlled by those mechanisms. Okay, so now I will turn upon, like now I have showed over here in a very beautiful way, that is stimulus arrives. Now now the stimulus will arrive and the endocrine cell will release the hormone from the gland, and then from the gland the hormone will be released into the bloodstream, and from the bloodstream it will be circulated towards the target cell. Okay, so over there on the target cell, the hormone has its receptor. They will bind to it and then they will show its response. Now we know that this is a major difference that students should be knowing, that what is the difference between the nervous system and the endocrine system. Nervous system is short term and quick response, and whereas if I talk about the endocrine system, it is a long term and slow response. Yes, that is why when we take a medication that has to maintain the hormones level into the normal state, so those medications the patient has to take for 2 to 3 months regularly. So we can say from that point that endocrine system is a long term. We have to take the long term medication and also a slow response, but the nervous system is a short term and it is a very quick response. Okay, so this difference should be cleared. So again I have written these all points that can be cleared from which I've explained over here. I have written over here. So now I will be covering about the hormones. So hormones are basically of 2 types. If I talk about the hormones, they are lipid hormones. Some hormones are lipid hormones. That means they hate water and they bound to the protein in the blood. So these hormones are known as the lipid hormones. Okay, and then these are the classification. I have beautiful classification of hormones. So basically if I look at this classification, hormones are of 3 types. Number 1 is the amino acid derivative, and the second is the peptide hormone, and the third is the lipid hormone. Your steroid hormone, thyroid hormone, those are the lipid hormone. They are like, you can say that they are lipid derivative hormones, and they can cross the plasma membrane and bind to the receptor in the cytoplasm, and in this way they can initiate the response. But if I talk about the amino acid and peptide hormone, these 2 types of hormones, they bind to the specific receptor of the target cell, but they cannot cross the plasma membrane. Okay, as lipid hormone can cross the plasma membrane, they can bind to their receptor or on the cytoplasm or the nuclear receptor. They can bind to them and then they can initiate the response. If I talk about this hormone, these hormone, amino acid, and they are just having their receptor on the target cell. That means only on the particularly plasma membrane, and in this way they initiate their response. Okay, so I have written a note also over here that peptide hormones and amino hormones bind to the receptor on the plasma membrane, whereas the lipid derivative hormone, they can cross the plasma membrane because they are the lipid derivatives. Okay, and they can bind to the nuclear receptor, which is on the nucleus membrane. Okay, and then they can initiate the response. So you need to remember that steroid hormones are the example of lipid derivative hormones or the thyroid hormones. Okay, now if I talk about this, these are the notes. How now this is basically, I have given a very beautiful example of endocrine system, that how does the endocrine system maintains the homeostasis. This is the basic of our this chapter. This needs to be clear very carefully. Okay, so if I talk that, sorry, my video, my this phone is I'm not able to handle it out. Just wait a second please. I'm sorry for the disturbance in between. Yes, now it's clear. Now if I talk about the endocrine system, it maintains the homeostasis. As I have said that in our body there are two feedback mechanisms. One is the positive and another is the negative. Positive means that it is going to initiate the process, the process which is ongoing, it is going to increase that process, and the negative will basically work if something is going in an increasing order in our body. Something is released and it is increasing that effect. The negative feedback mechanism will basically decrease that effect. Okay, so in this way negative feedback mechanism works. The best example of the positive and negative feedback mechanism is what I will show you. That this is the RA system, that is renin angiotensin aldosterone system. And in the, if I talk about the positive feedback mechanism, in that we have the example of the oxytocin. So oxytocin is an hormone which is released during the delivery, and it has a function in the contractions. Okay, so whereas the negative feedback mechanism, if I talk about the RA system is the renin angiotensin aldosterone system. This system works when there is an hypo and there is an low decrease of the blood pressure. Okay, at that I will be clearing this thing. So this system gets activated, and then what happens in RA system, that it will release the aldosterone hormone. Aldosterone hormone will maintain the blood pressure by reabsorbing the sodium. Okay, from it, this system works basically on the nephron part of the kidney, and from where there it will distal convoluted tubule, it will reabsorb the sodium ion into the bloodstream, and in this way it is going to rise the blood pressure. Okay, so this is a beautiful example of a blood glucose level. For example, I was talking about a blood glucose level. So bloodstream, you know that, like if there is a low glucose level, okay, the low glucose level is not good for our body. We know that because our body tissue needs the energy. So in this response to the response, this is a response, as I told you that stimulus arrived. So in this way, what is a stimulus? That there is a decrease of the blood glucose. So this is a stimulus. So stimulus will arrive now. So stimulus will arrive, like I have said you. We get a stimulus that there is a low blood glucose, okay, in the bloodstream. So what will happen? The second step is that endocrine cell releases the hormone from the gland. So we know that, particularly this is an example, whenever there is a low glucose, so what will happen? Now endocrine cell on the where? Pancreas cell or alpha cell, that will secrete one of the hormone that is known as the glucagon into the bloodstream. Now what is the function of a glucagon? It basically increases the glucose. So glucagon will travel through the bloodstream into the liver, which is the basically the target cell. So glucagon, like I said you that whenever the endocrine cell releases the hormone, so it has to travel to the bloodstream to reach to the target cell. So here the target cell is the liver, where it will have their response. Now what is the response it is going to have? that glucagon will bind to the receptor on the liver cells. Okay, so in this way what it will do, that it will stimulate the liver to break down glucagon to secrete the glucose. Okay, so it will basically break down the glucagon into the glucose. Okay, so in the liver we know that there is a process of breaking down of the glucogen into the glucose. So glucagon will stimulate that process. So in this way you can say that your glucose is being produced by breaking down of the glucogen. So where that breaking down of the glucogen is taking place, that is taking place in the liver. So we can say that glucagon is an hormone that is secreted by the where that is secreted from the pancreas cell, or you can say from the alpha cell. Don't confuse between alpha and beta. Generally the student gets confused. This is, yeah, from the beta cells the glucagon is released. No, that is wrong. The beta cell your insulin is released. Okay, so this is a positive feedback mechanism. Okay, so what will happen then? From the response by the liver cell will, what it will do, it is going to secrete the glucose into the bloodstream, and in this way your blood sugar level will be increased. So this is an example of positive feedback mechanism. Okay, in this way we can say that endocrine system is maintaining the homeostasis by positive feedback mechanism. I have covered one of the example of blood glucose level. When your blood glucose level gets decreased, in that response what happens, our body gets the stimulus. The stimulus will arrive into where? Into the endocrine cell, that is known as the pancreas cell. From the pancreas cell, which cell? Alpha cell. There will be release of the glucagon hormone into the bloodstream, and the glucagon has its function. Now it is in the bloodstream. Now it will travel towards the target cell. Which target cell? Particularly on some particular, you can say, on the tissue, that means on the liver tissue. Okay, that is a target cell, where, because liver has our various processes, it produces the glucose, it break down so many things, isn't it? So what what this glucagon will do, it will basically initiate this breakdown of the glucogen into the glucose, and now what happened, this is converted into the glucose. Now the glucose will be secreted into the bloodstream. In this way our glucose is being raised in our blood. Okay, this needs to be clear. So the one of the major point is that student don't has to confuse it with the alpha and the beta cells over here. Okay, so if I look over here, excuse me please. Wait a second, sorry.